Now, it is possible to reverse a marriage as if it never existed. In law, we call that an annulment, meaning that if an annulment is granted by the courts, then it's as if the marriage never took place and legally you were never married to that person and cannot be called their ex-spouse or divorced by that person, etc. It's a technical ground, and in essence it means the courts have looked at the facts and the evidence of the matter before them and decided that there was something particularly peculiar about the circumstances of that relationship that means it doesn't fulfill the criteria of what a marriage ordinarily entails. So the key grounds that I express in our laws about how a person can get a marriage annulled is if, for instance, within a year of marriage, you discover that your partner actually is of unsound mind in terms of certain things they've done, shows that they're pretty crazy, they're pretty out there. And so you seek an annulment from the court because of those actions that you can prove. Non-consummation, for instance, that within the first year, because these two grounds, it has to happen within 12 months of marriage that you file, that the party or one of you didn't consummate in terms of after the marriage day, you didn't have sex, essentially, and so it can't be seen that the marriage has been sealed, per se. And pregnancy, for instance, if the person or if your partner becomes pregnant by someone else in marriage and you can sort of prove that they've had an affair, you can prove they're pregnant, and some labs can in fact determine the DNA of a child before it's born. Things like that go towards evidence for saying that the person was pregnant within marriage, and so if it's not your child, you should have an annulment. And then venereal disease, for instance, if all of a sudden you didn't have a disease and then you slept with this partner and can go to great lengths to show that's the only person you slept with and you got a disease from them, or you have further evidence to support that partner indeed had a disease and passed it on to you, then those are grounds for annulment. And procedural defects is another technical one, as well as incest. For instance, you might not know that you're marrying a family member and you do, so you can get an annulment, as well as impotence and different reasons as well. And the procedural steps is that your lawyer will file an annulment petition on your behalf. There'll be a court hearing, and if need be, there'll be a medical examination for the insanity or for the venereal disease, and there might be expert witnesses for the different grounds that you provide, and then the court makes a decision. But annulment law is not only very specialized, so very few lawyers in any country have the experience to deal with it, but it also is very peculiar because, for instance, a child born out of a marriage that is later annulled cannot be seen as quote-unquote a bastard child, in terms of any child born in the marriage is a child of the family, even if the court says an annulment took place, so those people were never married. So the child is always covered by the law and by God, of course, if born in marriage. And again, there are certain restrictions in terms of the insanity, the pregnancy, and the venereal disease. That has got to take place within 12 months. So you've got to file within 12 months in order to claim those particular things. And of course, there are different grounds for annulment, but those are the ones that are the most obvious ones. So if, for instance, you know of someone or you yourself are encountering a marriage that seems very peculiar, because there can be arguments, there can be unreasonable behavior and things that make a party want to walk away. But if a marriage goes beyond that and there is something that is particularly peculiar, then a person can indeed get an annulment. And the more specialist advice you seek, the more likely you are to be able to provide relevant evidence. And it is a bit of an academic thing in terms of, the lawyer has to present academic arguments as well as rely very heavily on proof, because judges do grant annulments, but they definitely want to see that exceptional circumstances exist. So I hope that has been helpful for you today, and that in future you can advise someone should they have a particularly peculiar situation and they want to reverse the marriage as if it never existed, and under the eyes of law, the law and God and society, the marriage never took place.